All right, hello everybody. This is Tim, and I'm on Skype right now with Bighara, aka Jeff, and we're just going to talk a little bit about his company and see whatever we can come up with. So, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, this is Jeff, aka Bighara.
All right, that
That's
works.
about it.
Not much to really say there, I guess. So yeah, I've been really interested in hearing about your company because I know you've had some things that you said in the past about some of your products, and I really don't know much about it. So I was kind of curious, maybe just how you got started. I know there's a lot of people out there that would be interested in perhaps, eventually putting out some of their own stuff. So I don't know. How'd you get started?
Poorly. No. We got started. My brother and I decided back in. Well, we started working on it actually in fall of 2009, but that was mostly planning, and we actually released our first products plural, in February of 2010. And really, it was just something where both of us had been gaming for forever, and we decided that we thought we could do some decent stuff that would be something other people might find fun to read or interesting to use. And it's always the dream, to like work in the RPG industry when you're a gamer. That's like the idea that the dream job. But the truth is, I have a day job, and this is just sort of like a hobby business. It doesn't. I'm not raking in the millions of bucks or anything off of it.
Something on the side, I guess, just a little extra cash here and there.
Yeah,
That's cool.
there are folks out there that push it a little further than that, but it is it's definitely a labor of love. It's not a get rich quick scheme. So yeah,
I've often heard that RPG writers really, even compared to other writers, don't really make that much, especially per hour when you start to figure that out.
Oh, don't pay yourself for your time. I'll tell you that right now. We do a lot of sales, especially with the PDF sales and things like RPG Now, but
Okay.
especially in things like the old school Renaissance community, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, the
That's
OSR.
really
Yeah.
the OSR. It's a real niche market. It's fun because I know a lot of the people and I communicate with a lot of people, so it's fun to get the feedback from them. But it's definitely not a mass market appeal kind of a thing. It's certainly specializing to a degree.
Well, from your perspective, do you think that community is growing? Because it seems to me that it is slowly growing, perhaps. I don't know, maybe in sales. Have you noticed anything?
I think so. I don't think you're seeing anything like the explosion of growth in gamers like back in the salad days of TSR in the 80s and stuff, where everybody was trying out D&D and stuff. But I think what you're finding, and I actually had a really interesting conversation with a local game store owner yesterday on the phone, and she was explaining how even though a lot of their focus in their store is on things like board games and stuff, they do have tables for people to sit down and play various games and do puzzles and things. And she has a regular influx of people using the tables for role-playing games.
That's cool.
And she says she sees a lot of folks who played when they were younger and kind of got out of it and are like coming back to it. Like, what would be fun is play some D&D, and
That's cool.
They're coming back to it. And some of them are going to the 4th edition and things like that, but some of them are saying, I didn't play that when I was a kid. I wonder if the version I played is still around. And I think a few people are finding things like Labyrinth Lord and stuff that way. And then a lot of the products out there, like ours and other people's as well, there's no shortage of material if you want to get an adventure or a supplement or something like that.
Do you think that people having kids maybe had something to do with that too? Because I've often heard you have your kids and then gaming kind of gets put on the back burner for a while, and maybe the kids grow up a little bit and, I got some more free time. Maybe I should check out some RPGs like I used to, and they come back to the hobby and it's a little bit different than what they remember. Maybe that's helping the old school,
Oh, sure. I could totally see that. I know, and there's the variation on that where you have people where as their kids get a little older, they think, hey, maybe I should try playing some D&D with my kids.
That's cool.
And then, you look at something like Labyrinth Lord or basic D&D or something like that. You say, this is not, it's weighed down with tons of extra rules and stuff. And it's simple enough to get started, and they can go with that, and it reminds them of what they played when they were younger. Sure.
I could definitely see starting out kids with a more rules light sort of engine, something that's pretty simple, something that's easy to teach. And then, maybe in time, if they want something more, they could go on to other games. But I do think that, like, Labyrinth Lord and Basic D&D and stuff is a good intro level game where there really isn't that much to learn before you start rolling the dice and talking in funny voices, So, I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. I think it does definitely fall in that category. I mean, on the one hand, I freely admit that the older games, they have their quirks where, that was just how the games were done back then. You didn't have a unified mechanic or things like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not that there's so many rules to learn. So you can say, look, a low AC a low armor class is better than a high armor class. Just roll with it. Don't ask a lot.
Don't ask questions. Just play.
just play. Shut up and kill the orc, or there won't be any dessert.
That's great. So
but, yeah, I can see that.
But so with your company, so it's basically just you've always kind of wanted to do it, and you just kind of jumped in with both feet, or I guess maybe like a big toe, and then started working on things on the side.
I'd say we exercise caution in the regard that we really try to minimize how much we invested up front in terms of our actual personal money.
Okay.
We really wanted to start modestly and sort of test the waters, like you were saying. And also the other thing we did is we spent several months getting ready, and one of the things we did was actually get several products written ahead of time. So we actually had a little bit of a buffer.
Okay.
In the idea that we would when we first started releasing products, we released a couple right away, but we still had a couple sort of in the queue. And we would once a month we released something new, and in that interim time, it gave us a chance to get another product ready. So we wouldn't get into a situation where we might come on strong at the beginning with a whole bunch of products, and then there'd be a year with nothing there.
Yeah, I got that.
And we haven't stuck completely to the monthly schedule, but we've tried to stay pretty close. We've done. Well, Less and More, which was you had mentioned earlier, was a really big product, and we actually had a couple months there where we were just hip deep in that, and we didn't really have anything come out in that time. But at the same time, we had a couple of things we were working on in the back burner, and we were able to get right after Less and More, we were able to release Technomancer almost immediately.
Okay.
So we were able to kind of catch up a little bit.
I know some gaming companies they have a tendency to they'll promise something like, oh, okay, this product's going to come out, and then people get all upset when that deadline kind of rolls by, a couple weeks go by. But I can definitely understand, there's a lot of things that go into making a product, and there's always technical difficulties that sometimes crop into things, and
totally.
I'm sure
we try hard not to do that. We try hard not to promise a given date. It'll be out by May. It's no, we don't know that. I'll sometimes post something in the blog, in the company blog, saying, we're shooting for this, but we can't really guarantee that because we're still waiting on some art, or there's a million edits still to make, or whatever it is. So
that's probably the best way to go about it, because if you don't promise something, you don't have to fulfill that promise. So
yeah, and you don't have to backfill on it when I said May, I really meant May of next year, or something like that.
So
we
go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Good.
I was going to say the other issue there is that we really we're pretty picky about a lot of things. We do a lot of several iterations of proofreading and editing and stuff, so that can be time consuming. So we can't be sure because we find something up that's all wrong. We've got to change it. So you think you're done and you're not.
Yeah, I can see last minute things why didn't we catch this one typo on page 27? We've read this thing 20 times and it's still there. How do we miss that?
Our editor's emails toward the end. My brother, who was the primary author on Lesserton, he simply said, "I can't open it. I can't open the email because I'm already doing layout. Just tell me how bad it is." And I opened up and go, "There's only 3 things." He's like, okay, great. In other words, I'm like, "Oh man, you're not gonna like this." 30 things in there, you refer to page 26, but page 26, I think you meant page 28. and you refer to it 9 times. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, I've play tested a couple products, and there have been several times when it was supposed to be towards almost done, and then I'd catch something pretty major and be like, oh, I got to change some mechanics, or I got to move this stuff around, or so yeah. I know that
we had something. I think it was in one version of one part of the Lesterton thing. There's a section where it helps you generate the sort of the contents of the ruins, like what kind of stuff is in a given area.
That sounds cool.
And we realized, because of some fluke of the tables, there was a certain result was actually impossible.
Oh, like you can never
you
roll that high. Oh, okay, all right.
So it was. We said, oh, gee, I guess we really ought to rework that table. That sort of thing. All part of the process.
Well, we've been talking a lot about Lesterton and more. Maybe it'd be a good idea to, I don't know, you've done a little quick intro blurb on your channel. Did you want to talk about anything else about that product?
Should I just go ahead and show?
Yeah, why not? I mean, unless you feel really uncomfortable, feel free. I'm interested,
Okay, well, we probably got about 20 products out there in between print and PDF products. Right now, we've got about 5 different things that we've actually got in print. Lesterton's one of them. We've got Skull Mountain, which was the one that I put out back in the summer last year.
Okay.
We have the new one, which is Realm of the Technomancer. Of course, I'm showing it to you in the little Skype camera, but but this was a fun product to do. I did this one while we were working on Lesterton because it's sort of crossover between Mutant Future and Labyrinth Lord. So you've got post-apocalyptic elements and fantasy elements going. And then my brother came up with this goofy idea, which I like a lot, of the cover. I don't know if you can see this, where you open it up from this side, and it's for one game system. You flip it over to the other way, and you play it from the other direction as for the other system.
Oh, so one's Mutant Future and one's Labyrinth Lord? Is that
right?
That's awesome.
It's a crossover, so the idea is you can play it as a Labyrinth Lord game where there are post-apocalyptic elements sort of crossing over to the Labyrinth Lord world.
Okay.
Or you can play it as a Mutant Future game where there are Labyrinth Lord aspects crossing over to the Mutant Future world.
That sounds like a pretty awesome idea, actually.
Yeah. And then there's some custom rules in there about if you're using technology and magic in the same place, possible side effects and things like that.
Or how they interact with each other, it sounds like?
Yeah, that's kind of. It's basically the idea is if you are using a lot of magic and a lot of high tech in the same area, it's possible for bad things to happen. I don't know if you've ever read this isn't exactly the same thing, but if you ever read the Harry Dresden books.
I have never read them, but I've had lots of people tell me I should, and they get quite mad at me when
They're pretty good. But one aspect of him being a wizard in the modern day world is there's a lot of high-tech stuff he just simply cannot physically be around. If he walked into a room with a computer, the hard drive would crash, that kind of thing. So it's not quite that, but it's elements of that whole idea that they don't play nice together. And part of that was just to make it interesting, and part of that was to sort of avoid the Expedition to the Barrier Peak syndrome, where suddenly you've got like D&D characters running around with laser pistols and stuff like that.
Yeah, it kind of breaks the believability a little bit, I guess.
Well, oh yeah,
suspension.
Otherwise, the elven wizards were so believable. But I know what you mean. It's a balancing thing to a certain degree, and it's a flavor thing to a certain degree. Yeah. So I had a lot of fun with that. We've got a bunch of other stuff, other adventures. We have some Savage Worlds adventures too. We have Re-Energizers, which we did back last spring, about a year ago now. That was the first module ever to come out for Mutant Future. And that was a fun one to do. It was just a little, lark. It wasn't anything particularly deep or epic.
I guess I should probably say to the people that don't know what Mutant Future is, that's actually like the sort of retro clone of Gamma World. So,
yeah, it's very much like a Gamma World clone. It is built on the same mechanics as the Labyrinth Lord, so it plays very D&D-like. There are a few mechanical differences that you have to adapt to, but otherwise, you have hit points, you have armor class, and so forth and so on. But then you've got your mutations. You've got a character that's a mutated badger with laser vision or something like that. like so many of those Gamma World type games, it tends to lend itself to a certain amount of goofiness.
So it's definitely got some gonzo flavor in there, I guess.
Yeah,
a little bit, right?
very, very gonzo. Very. I'm sure there are people out there that are going to scream bloody murder about that and say, "Oh, we have a very serious, immersive role-playing Gamma World campaign we've been playing for 45 years or whatever." I'm sure you do, but I got to tell you, I played Gamma World back in the day. I've played some Mutant Future, and I've talked to a lot of people that play both those games and have been playing them, different editions, and it's a goofy game. I think 90% of the crowd would say no. It's fun, but it's definitely got goofy elements.
Well, I guess that's really like anything. I mean, you can play the game however you want to. You can change things, house rule things. I'm a constant tinkerer, so even when I'm actually running a game that's a certain system, people sit down and they might not recognize certain parts of it because I've butchered it and bolted on something else. So.
Oh yeah, no, I've done that to modules and things, and done tons of house rules. It's one of the things tying back in with kind of that and how that vis-a-vis the company that almost chafes a little for me is that because so often when we're playing something for a play test or something like that, I can't house rule it a lot because it's got to be something closer to by the book, because if it's going to be a product, you can't assume all these house rules that the customer wouldn't necessarily be using. So, a lot of times I think of some cool house rule or what I think is a cool one, and I'm like, I can't really use that because we're trying to play test this for straight D&D or Labyrinth Lord or whatever.
So I guess there's got to be some uniformity to the rules when you're play testing, running.
It's got to be something closer to by the book.
Yeah, that would be tough for me.
Yeah, well, it is, but it's a fun challenge too, because it's neat to find ways to try and work within that, but at the same time, you come up with some idea like actually Technomancer kind of came out of that a little bit, where I had these ideas for sort of a Thundar the Barbarian type game.
Nice.
And there was mutants and post-apocalyptic and some technology, but also magic. And I started thinking about how those could work together. And the problem was, frankly, the players I had weren't actually all that interested in playing that genre, so it didn't really happen at the table, just as a recreational game. But then it sort of morphed into a product. That's
pretty cool. It's good. So it sounds like kind of like a kitchen sink kind of game, where you can just throw in just about anything and see how it meshes together.
That's true, and that's part of the fun of the games, like you say, like the basic D&D and the Labyrinth Lord and things like that. They're light enough and they're robust enough, just as they are, that they don't suffer if you slap on a house rule or say, I just don't want to use that or something. Whereas some more complex games, in a way, are almost more fragile. If you start tweaking them, it can cause a chain reaction in the rules, and you realize, well, now I've completely broken this over here, because everything is so tightly interwound that it's hard to just yank one bit out and say I'm not using that, and then I'm just gonna slap this in instead. Yeah, maybe it's less,
I think maybe the older games are more modular. Like you were saying, like you can cut one part out, and it doesn't really affect the other parts of the game, but let's say like 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons, I tried to remove attacks of opportunity, and then there's like a ripple effect,
Yeah, totally. And the 3rd edition, I wasn't going to name names, but yeah, that was the game in my head when I was referring to that. Okay. I don't know about things like 4th edition because I haven't played it, but I suspect it's a similar situation. It's something where everything is very tightly balanced against everything else, which is, from a design perspective, kind of impressive, but from a playability perspective, I don't know. Some people for different versions, people who like different editions may have a different mindset, but I know a lot of the people I deal with and I talk to, whatever old school means, they tend to be old school and they tend to like to tinker.
Yeah, I'm definitely a tinkerer, so I can definitely, like you say, I understand, and I think it's kind of cool that some systems are that tight, but at the same time, when you start messing with the gears, you're like, well, I can't really take anything out, because if I do that, then this isn't going to work, and then I'll have to come up with even more house rules to try to fix the things that I'm trying to fix, and I don't know, it just seems kind of like a nightmare from a tinkerer's perspective. Like I said, I haven't really played some of the newer editions of things, so I'm not going to really comment on that, but But yeah, I like to rip the hood open and rip parts out and see if it still works. So
the visual that always comes to mind for me is actually the from the movie Iron Man, where he's in the cave and he's supposed to build the missile, and he's actually going to build a little thing for his heart, and he's yanked open a missile, and he just needs the one part out of it, and he's pulling out the chip or whatever it is, and he just grabs this big hunk of complex machinery, goes, don't need this anymore, and he just chucks it over his shoulder. And that's you can do that. You're like, I'm going to add this cool critical hit chart, and it's going to totally redo how I do hit points, but you know what? It's not going to really actually break the rest of it if I just do hit points a different way.
Yeah.
If I want to make, instead of 0 being dead, I want to make it, -10 or whatever. I can switch that around or what have you.
Yeah, it seems to be with the whole like do-it-yourself kind of ethos and being able to just mess with things. I'm kind of an old school convert. I think I might have mentioned this in the past, where I played some older games, and I kind of got away from it for a while. I started playing 3rd edition again and some other games, and then I started collecting all these different RPGs, and I got burned out on fantasy for a long time. And
it can happen. Genre burnout is not uncommon.
And I think part of it was just I'm a very rules light guy, and I found Labyrinth Lord and some of these other old school retro clones, and the rules were pretty low, and it just got me to love sort of traditional fantasy again. So I think for that reason I really like Labyrinth Lord.
Yeah, I had a bit of genre burnout on fantasy, but specifically on dark fantasy a while back with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which I've actually video blogged about, which I love the game. But you play sort of that, and it can happen with things like horror too, or any genre really. You play that for a while, and it's just like, it gets depressing. You're like, oh man, everything's just gloom and doom and chaos and insanity and death and mutation. And like, all right, you know what? I want to be a hobbit, for crying out loud.
You want something a little bit lighter every once in a while, right?
You just play Care Bears, the RPG. I don't know, something.
Oh, I have a tendency to run settings like Midnight, where it's kind of dark, and I had a fantasy setting that was.
I've heard of that one. It's, what if Sauron won? Isn't that the?
That's pretty
the
much it. Yeah,
thing?
like most of the halflings are slaves, and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
well, and those are fun, and they're great for narrative conflict and things like that. And I'm not knocking them, because I like Dark Heresy, the 40K RPG. I like the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I like Call of Cthulhu. I haven't played a lot of World of Darkness. I own a couple of the books, and I've read them. And I read stuff like H.P. Lovecraft and things. I got no problem with dark as a genre, I'm just using that as an example of one where there was a particular period in our group's gaming where we played a lot of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay over the course of, I don't know, about a year and a half, and it was just, dealing with, most of it centered around dealing with things like fighting this cult of Nurgle, which is always disgusting. And for those of you who don't know, Nurgle's the sort of pestilential god of disease, so, couldn't be something, just fun, like, let's just fight the warrior god and have a lot of combat. No, it's got to be plagues and flies and feces, and it's just blah. But anyway, yeah, so it gets kind of old after a little while. You're like, geez, can we just play a game where going insane is not part of the standard day?
Well, I think it's like you're saying. It's not the particular genre. It's just basically just variety is nice. Variety is the spice of life, and all that.
I just posted a video blog about keeping player interest and keeping the momentum going in a campaign. But oddly, the flip side of that is, I think it's fun to change it up every now and then. I think it's fun to say, hey, let's play a Western, or let's play, we're playing all this D&D. Let's play some Gamma World or Mutant Future. Let's just mix it up, and even just a one shot, even just like let's just play this one adventure, and let's all be mutant badgers or whatever the heck it is, and we'll get back. Let's go fly spaceships for a little while. Let's play some Star Wars or whatever, and then we'll get back to killing orcs. Just to mix it up. And the risk there, I find, is if your campaign, your quote unquote normal campaign, doesn't have the legs to keep going or to survive the break, you're like getting people back to it. So it's always scary to pause the default campaign, because you're like, oh, geez, this is going to be the nail in the coffin kind of thing.
I guess I tend to like to run one-shots too, especially for my group, because they tend to like 1 or 2 games, and I'm kind of the guy that has the bookshelf full of stuff.
Yeah.
They're kind of like, they're like my...
Oh, I've seen the background on your video blog. I'm aware of the bookshelf.
Yeah, I think it's actually grown since I've done that video, but...
Well, I've got a book. I've got an IKEA bookcase down here in the basement where I am now, pretty much just full of gaming books, yeah. And there's more besides, but I'm familiar.
Yeah, I've actually had a hard time keeping a long-standing campaign running. So I guess what you're saying with your fears of, well, if you run a one-shot and then people have a lot of fun, do they actually want to go back to the campaign? Yeah, I've seen that happen a couple times where people are like, that one-shot was a lot of fun. Maybe we should have a campaign of that next instead of going back to the old game. So I guess you're right on that one.
Yeah, I find that one of the big complaints I hear, not just from my players, that they complain about everything because they're just that way, but no, but a lot of things, there's one of the reasons a lot of players will vote for the long-term campaign is they want to level up. They want to, they're like, do we have to start at first level again? Can we just start at 9th? We've done first level. And I'm a big believer in playing the character up from the start, especially with an old school game like basic D&D or Labyrinth Lord, where, character fatality is so common at low levels. It's like, no, you gotta get this guy to survive, not to tangent off into another campaign story. It's like, unless you were there, it's not interesting, kind of thing. But in the Lesserton stuff, my character, which was a fighter, he was literally about 40 experience points from 2nd level, and he got killed. And if he had leveled up in that last session, he would have had another hit die, and he would have survived that combat.
So, yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, it's just like, and my brother was DMing, and he looks and he goes, how many hit points do you have left? I'm like, don't softball it in. Just tell me how much damage it was. Like, it's 10 points. I said, I had 8 left. I'm dead. That's it. And that's okay. Rolled up another character, but at the same time, that's what happens. They get killed a lot. So the idea is, by the time you get that character to whatever 5th, 6th level, you know that character. You're invested in keeping that character alive. You're not going to throw him a lava pit just because you think it's funny.
Well, there's actually a good segue I want to put in here. I'm running that Labyrinth Lord game, Darb's Hill, and I have a tendency to not kill characters, but maim them. And they got scars.
Well, that's an interesting point, because, that's one of the things about a D&D hit point system, especially with magical healing. You don't have a lot of situations where you're just crippled or hurt. It's you're fine, you're dead. Yeah, that's sort of how it goes. And then you're healed, and bing, you're back to fine. And it's fun to do that. I was talking before about house rules, and I had worked up this campaign setting that I wanted to try and run, but it's heavily house ruled. Very, very Swords and Sorcery Conan-y, but basically Labyrinth Lord. And one of the things in there was a critical hit table. And one set of possible results involved things like maiming, like you lose a hand kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the idea being, well, short of like a regeneration spell, you're not getting that hand back. You only took 4 points of damage because it was a nice clean cut, but the hand's still gone after someone does a cure light wounds. They can't just reattach the hand.
Well, see, what I like about maiming and like injuries like that is that it makes
it just sounds so wrong. You know what I like about maiming? The screams.
I guess it is what it is, but it's just that the characters have to do things slightly different, and like you were saying, they get used to that character. They they learn what they're like, how they react to things. And, you have a character with one hand, you're going to play that character a lot differently than you would when that character had 2 hands. It's just...
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're not carrying the torch and fighting with your sword at the same time, are you?
No, yeah, you can't drink your healing potion and swing your sword at the same time. You got to pick one, things like that. So, I think that adds some elements to things, and I don't know.
I think it does. I think it can. And it's not even the call that some players will make is like, are you just trying to screw me over? It's like, no, it's come on, you're in a sword fight. I mean, you don't think it hurts possibility? I think it was in Skull Mountain. Yeah, I think it was Skull Mountain where we had put in an item which wasn't in the standard equipment list for Laboratory, which was caltrops.
Okay.
And I've seen them in other books, so I mean it's very similar to how they did it. But the thing with the caltrops was, if you stepped on them and you took damage from them, your foot was hurt and you couldn't run or anything until it was healed. Even though you may only be down 1 hit point, the nature of that specific injury impeded your movement.
Sounds good
and,
to me.
It's like, yeah, I know you have 25 hit points left, but your foot still really hurts, And the idea that little detail about the nature of the injury or the effect of the injury can add a lot of depth.
All right. Well, I'm looking at the clock, and I guess we've been talking for roughly half an hour.
Yeah, it looks like about that. Yeah.
Okay. So
it's not hard at least for me, and I imagine for anybody like you who does gaming video blogs, talk for a length of time about gaming. It's just not a challenge.
yeah, it's pretty easy. So, you want to have any closing remarks before we shut down here?
Buy my stuff. No.
That's fair.
Subscribe to my blog. No. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. It was very cool.
Yeah, I'll definitely put some links to your stuff down in the bottom in the description.
I appreciate it. If anybody has questions about it, I'm all over the Goblinoid and Dragon's Foot and all that, and we have our blog at our website. But no, this was just a lot of fun to do.
All right, well, thanks for doing it, and I don't know, I'll definitely talk to you on YouTube in the future. So
I imagine we will. Take it easy.
All right, man. See ya.